Hello, my name is Marquita Byrd, and I'm here to welcome you today to my program on interpersonal communication. I am a professor emeritus at San Jose State University, and I've had a career of teaching in public institutions for 45 years. Now, during my retirement, my joy is to share what I've taught for 45 years on the college campuses with the general public and the general community, because all of us need to learn how to live our best life. Today my topic is conflict, and I'm talking about conflict because it happens in every relationship, and sometimes it becomes unmanageable. I have two goals today. The first is to help you to understand the importance of conflict and conflict management in interpersonal relationships. And the second thing is to hopefully facilitate your acquisition of skills and knowledge that would allow you to manage conflict better in your life. Conflict is something that, again, occurs in our relationships. It can be used effectively if we have the tools to do it. Now, conflict, of course, we know happens in our families, most often when we're raising children and they're growing into adulthood. It happens in families in terms of married couples and their relationships. Conflict happens in our social settings. Sometimes we fall out with friends for one reason or another. It can happen in the employment situation, and the ultimate horror of that is that people lose their lives. So we need to know how to manage conflict better in every area of our lives. Now, today we're going to talk about 4 things. The first one is myths about conflict, and the second is sources of conflict. Third, fighting fair. Wow, that's a big one. And the last one, guidelines for managing conflict. Let me give you a definition of conflict. People want to say, well, how do we know we're in conflict? We're in conflict long before we start shouting at each other. Conflict is a expressed struggle over resources, anything that people think they want or think they need, and it's expressed struggle over resources that are scarce, means there's not enough of them, or they only appear to be scarce. And you may think to yourself, what kind of resources appear to be scarce? For example, love. When I was raising my son, if I gave one a hug and a kiss, I had to give the other one a hug and a kiss, as if hugs and kisses were going to be used up. But of course, my love for both of them was infinite, and they could have as many hugs and kisses as they wanted, but they treated them as though they were scarce. Let's say clean air. Clean air is not a thing that actually is scarce if we manage our air quality, but we treat it as though it's scarce. Water. Water is scarce right now. We're in a drought, but it can be plentiful if we learn to use it effectively. So resources, things that we want or need, we think we want them or need them, and there's an expressed struggle. When I say expressed struggle, we have behaviors and conversations that allow us to know the struggle is taking place. Now, as I said, conflict is everywhere, and it can flare up at any time. We have differences in our intimate relationships, our parental affairs, social dealings, and employment situations. It's not unusual, and we simply need to know how to manage our conflicts. Let me point out and say that not every conflict can be solved. Communication is not the panacea to solving all problems, because many problems occur not because it's poor communication, but we understand exactly what we were both saying, and we are at odds in terms of our goals. For example, the U.S. and Russia, we don't have conflict because we have poor communication. We have conflict because we have competing goals. The U.S. wants to rule the world, and Russia wants to rule the world. We understand each other perfectly, and then we need to work on those conflicting goals. So I talked about a definition of conflict as being an expressed struggle over resources, anything that people want or need, or they think they want it or need it. They can be scarce or only appear to be scarce. Now let's talk about myths about conflicts. The first thing is that people say, oh, no, don't have conflicts, that means it's bad. Conflicts does not mean that something is bad. Conflicts simply mean that people are having differences in terms of goals or ways of competing goals, but it's not bad. Conflict, in fact, has advantages. in that conflict improves our ideas. It improves our solutions. And if we never have conflict, we don't grow. Conflict can cause us to grow, and it could also improve intimacy, in that when we have conflicts and then we work through conflict, then we can have great intimacy. Number two, it's a sign of trouble. Conflict is not necessarily an indication that there's going to be trouble, that trouble is going to start. Again, it simply means that we're having differences in the goals that we want to reach, or how we're going to reach them. For example, in every survey on integration, blacks and whites say that they have the same goals, but we have different ways of meeting those goals. For example, blacks think things should go faster, whites tend to think they should go slower. Third, people consider conflict to be counterproductive, that it gets in the way of productivity. Again, in fact, it can improve productivity, because conflict can bring about better ideas. Wow, it's that important on the team. It can bring about better solutions, good for the company. It can improve product. For example, if Tide and, let's say, another detergent were not competing in the same market, we wouldn't continue to get better products. Because there's conflict between them, we get better products. Lastly, one of the myths is that there are no advantages to conflict, and in fact there are. It's dependent on how people manage it. It is unmanaged conflict that kills. It is unmanaged conflict that shuts down productivity, but conflict that is managed appropriately can be a good thing for a family, for a relationship, for a community. Let's talk about sources. Gosh, gee, what causes conflict? And we want to know that, because you cannot manage a conflict well. You certainly cannot solve it if you don't know what the source of the conflict is. And when we start talking about managing conflicts, we need to start first at what is the conflict about. The first thing usually is over power. Power is the ability to influence or control. And power is the ability to make decisions about things. So the first thing we ought to have conflict about is power. Who has the power? Who has the ability to make decisions and influence things? And of course, we know that power can come from several sources. It can come from money. It can come from the ability to give rewards and punishments. It can come to us through knowledge. The broadest source of power is knowledge. Let's go to B. Conflict can occur because of content in a relationship, or because of the relationship itself. Let's talk about content. Conflict can happen because we have disagreements over what it is we're about in this relationship. What are we supposed to be doing in this relationship? Are we supporting each other interpersonally? Are we working on a project? Are we trying to solve a problem? What is the content of the relationship? And very often, if you want to manage a conflict, you need to know, what are we doing in the relationship? The second thing is that we need to understand the relationship itself. Very often there's conflict over the relationship. What kind of relationship is going to be? Are we associates? Are we friends? Are we family? Are we lovers? Are we married? And what does that mean? So the relationship itself is very, very important, and often can cause conflict. Once I had a person I knew who thought she was my best friend. She says, "Oh, aren't we good friends?" And I said, "No, we're not good friends, because you never have time to do anything with me, and you never listen to me. So to me, that says we're not good friends." So we had a conflict about that, and kind of turned down the tone in our relationship. A third source of conflict is resources. Resources are the things that we need, or we want, or we think we need them or want them. And let me make this difference. When I was raising my sons and they were young, I noticed there was a period where I was tired every day before I went to work. I was tired by the time I got to work. And I thought, my gosh, what's going on? I realized that my sons were having an argument every morning about the pink cereal bowl. We had 4 cereal bowls, red, yellow, blue, and pink. But every morning, each one of them wanted the pink cereal bowl. Now, obviously, this was not a resource that they needed. It was something that they wanted or thought they needed. So they were arguing about the pink cereal bowl, who was going to use it first and that sort of thing. So I started doing things like, okay, you use it on Monday and Wednesday, and then you use it on Tuesday and Thursday. That didn't work out because we would forget what day who was using the pink bowl. Then I decided, okay, you use the pink cereal bowl, my oldest, and then you wash it and you give it to your brother. And that wouldn't work out because my oldest one would take a long time eating because he had the pink cereal bowl. So then finally one night, I was putting my oldest son to bed. I was putting the sons to bed, and my oldest son had the pink cereal bowl in the bed with him under the covers. And I thought, okay, this is going too far. I said, why do you have the pink cereal bowl in your bed? He said, so I can have it first. So when they went to work the next day, I burned the pink cereal bowl. And guess what? The next day, they were arguing about the hairbrush. Now, you have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old, and you know that neither one of them actually want to brush their hair, but they were arguing over the hairbrush, and I realized, what was the resource? Power. Who could have the ability to decide who could use the hairbrush? So I learned from my children. I learned about communication. So resources is important, and then differences in goals or how to reach those goals. So I tried to change how we could reach the goals. One used it one morning, the other used it the other morning. One washed it out, then the other used it. Just didn't work out. So then I came to understand that they were actually arguing over power, the oldest with the youngest. And that's very common in families that have two children or more. Today we're talking about conflict, which is something that happens in all of our lives and all of our relationships. And in fact, people tend to think that if you have a relationship and you never have conflict, that it's a fantastic relationship. That's not exactly true either. What we find is that people who never have conflict may be afraid to show their feelings or to talk about their differences, and that is not healthy. So having a little bit of conflict is not a sign of trouble. Let's move on to our third point, which is how to fight fair. Oh my goodness. Very often conflicts escalate to a proportion where they can no longer be managed, and people hurt each other because we don't understand how to fight fair. Now, let me give you an example from real life. If you see a professional fight on TV, then you will see that they have rules to fight by. Not like a WWE, because they don't have any rules. But when you look at real boxing, you'll see they have rules about how you can hit someone, where you can hit them, how long a fight can go on before it's stopped, all those sorts of things. Well, we need to have those when we talk about our conflicts with each other. And let's start with number one, the first guideline for fair fighting: do not make personal attacks. When you are having conflict over a content or the type of relationship, don't make unfair personal attacks. For example, well, you never listen anyway, or you don't know how to listen, or you're pretty stupid. You don't make those kind of personal attacks when you're having a conflict. One time my children were on the playground and they were having a conflict with another group on the playground. And so my sons were kind of winning the conflict, and so this other group called them the N-word. That totally stopped the conflict. That totally stopped any kind of management of it, because they used the N-word and it threw my sons off. So we don't make personal attacks in our. That's very difficult when you're in a personal conflict. It's very difficult not to make personal attacks. The second thing, refrain from belt lining. Belt lining, what is that? That's when you hit the person below the belt so that they cannot recover. Sort of like what I just told you with the racist comment. Belt lining is when you say something about the person, it is true, and it hurts, but they can't come back from it. Like saying something like, well, you have buck teeth, or you're retarded. Those sorts of things. And it's something that is true, but the person cannot get their breath from it. They cannot recover from that attack. So belt lining is not very good. Oh, you're old. Somebody told me that's true. I am old. Can't do anything about that. But that could stop the conversation. So refrain from belt lining. And most often, it is people who know us intimately that can do belt lining. You have to know someone very, very well to know what their sensitive area is and how to attack that sensitive area. We find it very often in family arguments, arguments between brothers and sisters, or married people, sisters, or parents. Belt lining usually it happens in relationships where people know each other very well, enough that they know where the trigger points are. C, refrain from physical altercations. Wow, can I say that enough? When you're having a disagreement with someone, never ever resort to physical altercations or touching someone, hitting someone. Now, you may say to yourself, what about parents who discipline their children physically? That's something very different. Physical discipline, and this is a definition that I adopted when I had children. Physical discipline happens when a parent is trying to stop a behavior that could be dangerous. And it happens when a parent uses their hand. They don't use things like books or belts or shoes, but they may use their hand. And ultimately, if you discipline the child physically and it does not extinguish the behavior that you're trying to extinguish, and you continue to physically discipline, then it becomes violence. So you have to make sure that you don't continue it even if the behavior has changed. I had to do it with my son. I decided when he was 3 that I would no longer physically discipline him because I was afraid that I was going to hurt him, because the behaviors weren't changing. I had to learn new ways. And what I did as a parent, I read a book on how to discipline without hitting. Wow, I like that book, and learn how to discipline him in other ways. So yes, you may physically discipline a child. That's not the same thing as having a fight with a grown-up. And you don't want to ever lay your hands on anyone during an argument, because we're all grown-ups and we don't touch each other physically unless without our permission. D, stay in the presence. When you're in a conflict, you want to stay in this moment, not last week or 2 weeks ago. And I call it, when you don't stay in the moment and you go to the past, I call it the S&H green stamp method of conflict. You're too young to probably remember this, but there was a time when you would go to the grocery store, and according to the amount of money that you spent, you would get these stamps. It would be yellow stamps for one store, green for another. And you had a book. They would give you a book, and you would put the stamps in the book. And after you had the book full, you would come back and you would get a pot or a pan or whatever you were saving for. And you could even save up many books. Well, sometimes people have conflict like that. All right, so 2 weeks ago, you were upset with me. You slammed the door, and I got upset. I never said anything. I just put my little stamp in the book. And then last month, you threw out my favorite toy, and I didn't know that you threw it out, so I don't say anything, but I put that in the book. Then a year ago, we had an argument because you left the house and you didn't tell me you were gone. I put that in the book. So today we're in an argument. I pull out my book, I pull out my stamp book, and I start laying it on you, what you did last week, last year, and that overloads the conversation, because the person, you're not in the present. You have to stay in the present. What are we having a conflict about today? Not last week, not last year. Don't bring that forward. Stay present. E, stay on topic. Wow, how many conflicts become unmanageable because we start out talking about A, then you go over to L, and then your partner goes over to C, or your friend goes over to X. So you're going from topic to topic, and you never solve the issue that you're having conflict with on that day. Stay on topic. And someone needs to make sure that we talk about what the topic is and what we're arguing about. Lastly, accept the emotions of the other person. When you're in conflict, don't say, well, you shouldn't feel like that, or I didn't mean it like that, because that's not important. You need to hear what the person is feeling at that moment and address that, particularly if harm has been done to the other person or they feel that they've been harmed. You can say sincerely, I'm sorry that I said that and it hurt your feelings. You need to address whatever the feelings are. Or I'm angry. Sometimes parents are arguing with children, and it's not okay for the child to say I'm angry. But we need to be able to say I'm angry, and the parent be able to deal with that. So, or I'm frustrated, or I'm upset, whatever it is the person is feeling, then you need to be able to address that. So we talked about fair fighting. Let's go on to point 4, and that is, what can we do to try to reduce conflicts? But I say most often we manage them. Most of them are never solved. The big conflicts in relationships most often are never ever resolved. They are managed. The first step is to determine exactly what the heck it is you're fighting about. You cannot solve a problem, you cannot reduce a conflict if you don't even know what the conflict is about. So you first need to sit down and say, okay, exactly what is it that we're arguing about? Exactly what is it that the conflict is about? I gave you the example of my children arguing over the pink cereal bowl, and for a while I thought it was about the pink cereal bowl. But then when I got rid of the pink cereal bowl, they were arguing about the hairbrush. And I realized, oh, it's not about that. It's about power. My oldest son was arguing with my younger son, and the conflict was over power. So what the heck are you arguing about? You need to sit down and figure that out. Discuss it, spell it out. Am I really upset about the fact that we went to a movie that I didn't like? Or am I upset about the fact that I don't get to ever choose the movie that I want to see? See, those are two different things. So you need to figure out what the argument is about. Number 2, own your feelings. Wow. And learn how to share what you feel. Own your feelings. Always use I statements. You describe what happened. We went to a movie tonight, and it wasn't a movie that I liked. I felt disrespected. Not you disrespected me, but I felt disrespected. Use I words always when sharing your feelings, because you choose how you feel, and you choose how people treat you. So you need to do that. And then once you have felt and understood what you're feeling, then you share that with the other person. Don't hold it in and expect the other person to figure out what you're feeling. You ever heard someone say, well, if you really love me, you would know how I feel? That is bullcrap, because none of us are mind readers. I can't read your mind. And no matter how much I love you or how much I like you, that doesn't mean that I know what you're feeling. You have to tell me what you're feeling. C, suggest solutions. Instead of just going on and on about a problem, let's get some solutions out there and get solutions from all people who are involved. So what are some solutions that we may choose? And this is very helpful, because just blindly arguing doesn't solve anything. What are solutions? And then weigh those solutions. Okay, this solution will work like this, that one will work that way. Which one will bring us the greater problem solving? So choose solutions that everyone could live with. Wow, this is a great one. Choose solutions that everyone can live with. Let's say we're going out to dinner, and I like Chinese and you like Italian, and neither one of us wants to give and go to each one, so we decide to go to a soul food restaurant. Neither one of us likes soul food, but we go there. We both lost. So we want to choose something that everybody gains something from, everybody can live with. So today we talked about conflict, which is a topic that is ever present in our lives. We talked about 4 different things. First, myths about conflict. Secondly, sources of conflict. Third, fighting fair. And fourth, guidelines for managing conflict. So as I said before throughout this presentation, that conflict is ever present. It's not a sign of a poor relationship, and it can have benefits. It is not that you're having conflicts, it is unmanaged conflicts that are the issue. Managing conflicts effectively can improve our everyday life. And I hope that you will use some of these techniques that I've talked about today. One, especially fair fighting, and how you can live your best life. Thank you for being with me today. Don't forget, go to the bottom of this video and you can click on a PowerPoint where you can learn more about it. Let's end with this statement by Lao Tzu, who is a Chinese philosopher. He said, quote, "In dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep to the simple. In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. and you need to be present when you're having conflicts. Lastly, he said, in conflict, be fair and generous. And I think those are rules that we can live by. So thank you for coming along with me today on this journey to understand interpersonal communication. And as my favorite person on television, Mr. Spock, says, live long and prosper.